The front door was unlocked. That was the first thing Noelle noticed when she got home from work that Tuesday evening. Terrence always locked the door. Always. Even when he was inside. He had this thing about it, had been that way for all 8 years of their marriage. He would check the lock twice, sometimes 3 times before bed. So when Noelle turned the knob and it just opened, something cold settled in her chest. She stepped inside. The living room was empty. Not messy, not rearranged. Empty. The couch was gone. The coffee table, the floor lamp, the bookshelf she had spent 3 weekends sanding and refinishing herself. The rug her mother had given them as a wedding gift. All of it. Gone. Noelle stood in the doorway for a long time. She set her bag down on the hardwood floor because there was nowhere else to put it. The sound of it hitting the floor echoed through the hollow room. She walked slowly through the house, room by room, and it was the same everywhere. The dining room, bare walls, bare floor. The kitchen. Every dish, every pot, every utensil taken from the cabinets, even the spice rack. He had taken the spice rack. The bedroom was the worst. The bed frame, the mattress, the nightstands. Her jewelry box was gone. The closet was half empty, his side cleaned out. But he had left her clothes hanging there, untouched, like a cruel courtesy, as if to say, I took everything that mattered to me, and you were not on that list. On the kitchen counter, stuck to the bare granite with a piece of tape, was a yellow sticky note in Terrence's handwriting. It read, "The lawyer will be in touch." 5 words. 8 years of marriage. 5 words. Noelle peeled the note off the counter and held it between her fingers. She read it 3 times. Then she folded it in half and put it in her coat pocket. She did not cry. She would not give this empty house the satisfaction of hearing her break. She walked to the garage. The garage had been Terrence's domain. His golf clubs, his power tools, his workbench with the expensive vice grip he never actually used. All gone now. The shelves were bare. The walls had outlines where things used to hang, shadows of the life that used to fill this space. But in the far corner, sitting on the concrete floor under a layer of dust, was one thing he had left behind. Her grandfather's toolbox. It was old. It was red, though the red had faded to a dull rust color years ago. The metal was scratched and dented. One of the clasps didn't close right anymore. It had sat in this garage for the entire length of their marriage, and Terrence had complained about it every single year. He called it that ugly piece of junk. He said it made the garage look like a salvage yard. He asked Noelle 100 times to throw it away, and 100 times she had said no. It was the only thing her grandfather Henry had left her when he passed, and she would not get rid of it. Not for Terrence, not for anyone. Now it sat alone in an empty garage. The one item her husband did not think was worth taking. Noelle crouched down next to it and put her hand on the lid. The metal was cool under her palm. She closed her eyes and thought about her grandfather, his big, rough hands. The way he smelled like wood shavings and peppermint. The way he would sit on the porch of his house in Charlotte and tell her stories about building things, about patience, about how the best things in life are the ones people overlook. "You would know what to do right now, Grandpa," she whispered. 3 weeks earlier, things had been different. Not good, exactly. The marriage had been cold for over a year. Terrence came home late most nights. He was distant at dinner, always on his phone, always answering work emails. Noelle had noticed the change, but she had convinced herself it was just stress. His real estate brokerage was growing. He was busy, that was all. But 3 weeks ago, Noelle had picked up his jacket to hang it in the closet, and a folded piece of paper had fallen out of the inside pocket. It was a receipt from the Monarch Hotel. A Tuesday night, room service for 2, a bottle of champagne and chocolate-covered strawberries. The date on the receipt was the same. Tuesday. Terrence had told Noelle he was at a late showing with a client. She had stood in their bedroom holding that receipt, and the ground had shifted under her. Not dramatically, not like an earthquake, more like the slow crack of ice on a frozen lake. The kind of break you cannot stop once it starts. Noelle had not confronted him that night. She had folded the receipt back up and put it in her own dresser drawer, hidden under a stack of old scarves. She needed to think. She needed to be sure. Because Terrence was a good liar. She had learned that about him over the years. He could look her straight in the eyes and tell her the sky was green, and something in his voice would almost make her believe it. So she waited. She watched. She paid attention to the small things. The way he angled his phone screen away from her, the way he showered the moment he walked through the door, which he never used to do. The way he stopped saying her name when he talked to her, like she was becoming invisible in her own home. And then, on a Saturday morning while Terrence was out for a meeting, Noel had found his iPad on the kitchen counter. He had left it behind, which was unlike him. It was logged into his messages. What she found there ended everything. But that part comes later. For now, Noel sat on the cold garage floor next to a rusty toolbox in a house that no longer felt like hers, holding a sticky note that told her nothing and everything at the same time. She pulled out her phone and called her best friend. Simone picked up on the second ring. "Noel, what's wrong?" "He's gone," Noel said. Her voice was steady, but just barely. "He took everything, Simone. The furniture, the dishes, the bed. He took the bed." Silence on the other end. Then Simone's voice, low and serious. "I'm on my way. Do not move." Noel hung up and looked around the empty garage one more time. The toolbox sat at her feet, dull, rusted, forgotten. She didn't know it yet. She had no way of knowing. But that ugly red box, the one thing her husband had not wanted, the one thing he had laughed at and mocked and tried to throw away for 8 years, was about to change her entire life. For now, she just sat there, alone in the quiet, and waited for her friend. 3 weeks before the house was emptied, Noel had sat on the edge of their bed with Terrence's iPad in her lap, and she had read every single message. There were hundreds of them, going back 2 years. 2 full years of texts between her husband and a woman named Betrayal Lawson. The messages started off professional enough. Betrayal worked as a receptionist at Terrence's real estate brokerage. The early texts were about office schedules, client callbacks, meeting reminders. But somewhere around 18 months ago, the tone had shifted. Pet names crept in, inside jokes. Then came the photos. Noel did not look at all of the photos. She looked at enough of them to understand what they were. Then she closed the gallery and sat very still for a long time. What hurt the most was not the images. It was the conversations around them. The way Terrence talked to this woman. He was playful, attentive. He asked about her day. He sent her morning messages that said, "Thinking about you." He made plans, not just for hotel rooms, but for weekends away, concerts, dinners, at restaurants Noel had never been to. He had not sent Noel a message like that in years. She couldn't remember the last time he had asked about her day and actually listened to the answer. She found a thread from 3 months ago where Betrayal had asked Terrence about his wife. "Does she suspect anything?" Betrayal had written. Terrence's response, "She has no idea. She's too busy with her little decorating projects to notice." Her little decorating projects. That was how he described her work. Noel had a degree in interior design. She had spent the last 6 years building a freelance business from scratch, taking on residential clients, working weekends and late nights to bring in enough money to contribute to the household, while Terrence used most of his commissions to fund his own lifestyle. And to him, it was little decorating projects. Noel had closed the iPad, placed it back on the counter exactly where she found it, and gone to the bathroom to wash her face with cold water. She looked at herself in the mirror for a long time. Her deep brown skin, her high cheekbones, the small scar on her chin from a bicycle accident when she was 9. She was beautiful. She knew that, not in a vain way, but in the way her grandfather had always told her. "Noel, you are a beautiful girl, inside and out, and don't let any man make you forget it." Terrence had made her forget it. Not all at once. Slowly, year by year. A comment here about her hair. A sigh when she got dressed up for a dinner. A lack of compliments that eventually became a lack of acknowledgement altogether. She had started to believe the silence meant she was not worth noticing. But standing in that bathroom, looking at her own face, she remembered who she was before him. When Terrence came home that Saturday afternoon, whistling, smelling like cologne that was too fresh for a morning meeting, Noel was sitting at the kitchen table. The iPad was beside her. "Hey," he said casually, "you been home all day?" "Sit down, Terrence." Something in her voice made him stop. He looked at the iPad, then at her. "What's going on?" I know about Brielle. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Noelle had ever heard. It filled the entire kitchen. Terrence's face went through about 5 different expressions in 3 seconds. Shock, denial, calculation, anger, and then something that almost looked like relief. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, but his voice had lost its confidence. I read the messages, Terrence. 2 years of them. I saw the photos. I saw the hotel plans, the dinner reservations, the weekends you told me you were at conferences. He sat down slowly, not across from her, but at the far end of the table, like he needed distance. Look, Noelle. Do not lie to me. That's the one thing you can do for me right now. Do not sit in this kitchen and lie to my face. Another silence. He rubbed his hands together, looked down at the table, then back up at her. Fine, he said. Yes, it happened. But you need to understand, things between us haven't been right for a long time. You know that. So that's your reason. I'm just saying, it's not black and white. We stopped connecting. You were always working, always in your own world with your design stuff. I tried to talk to you about it. Noelle stared at him. When? When did you try to talk to me about it? He opened his mouth, then closed it, because they both knew the answer. He had never tried. He had just found someone else. Brielle makes me feel alive, he said quietly, like this was supposed to be an explanation that would make sense. She's exciting. She pays attention. She's 28, Terrence. She works at your front desk. That's not what this is about. You're right. What this is about is that you have been lying to me every single day for 2 years. You looked me in the eyes, morning after morning, and you lied. Terrence leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. And then he said the thing that burned the deepest. Maybe if you had put as much effort into this marriage as you put into rearranging furniture for strangers, we wouldn't be here. Noelle stood up from the table. She picked up the iPad and placed it gently in front of him. I want a divorce, she said. Noelle, come on. Let's not be dramatic about this. I want a divorce, and I want you to move out. This is my house too. Then I'll leave. Oh, now you want to leave? After everything I've done for this family? She almost responded to that. Almost. The words were right there, lined up and ready. All the nights she had cooked dinner alone. All the holidays he had cut short. All the school reunions and family events she had attended by herself because he was working late. All the time she had made excuses for him to her friends, to her mother, to herself. But she did not say any of it, because she realized in that moment that Terrence was not someone who could hear the truth. He had built a version of reality where he was the good guy, and nothing she said would crack it. So she turned and walked out of the kitchen, took her phone into the bedroom, and called Simone. He admitted it, Noelle said. 2 years, Simone, 2 years. I'm so sorry, Noelle. I need a lawyer. Simone gave her Patricia Okafor's number that same night. Patricia was a family law attorney Simone's cousin had used 2 years ago. She was known for being thorough, honest, and impossible to intimidate. Noelle called Patricia on Monday morning and told her everything. I'll need copies of those messages, Patricia said. Screenshots, timestamps, anything you can get. Do you have access to financial records? Some. He keeps a lot of things separate. That's going to be a problem. Men like Terrence always have something tucked away where they think no one can see it. We'll find it. What Patricia did not say, and what Noelle would learn the hard way, was that finding hidden money meant nothing if you couldn't prove it in court. And Terrence, for all his faults, was very good at hiding things. That night, Noelle slept in the guest room. Terrence slept in the master bedroom like nothing had happened. She could hear him on the phone through the wall, his voice low and muffled, and she knew exactly who he was talking to. She lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and she made herself a promise. She would not scream, she would not beg, she would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her fall apart. She would walk out of this marriage with her dignity, even if it was the only thing she had left. The divorce moved fast and ugly. Within a week of Noelle's confrontation, Terrence had hired an attorney named Lance Greer, a man known around the county courthouse for being loud, aggressive, and fond of turning simple divorces into courtroom theater. Lance Greer did not care about fairness. He cared about winning. Patricia Okafor was the opposite. She was calm, precise, and she never raised her voice. She read every document twice. She asked questions that seemed small but always led somewhere important. And she told Noelle the truth, even when the truth was hard. "Here's where we stand," Patricia said during their second meeting. They were in Patricia's office downtown, a clean, no-nonsense space with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a single plant on the windowsill. "Terrence's income on paper is significantly higher than yours. His W-2 from the brokerage shows a base salary plus commissions. Your freelance income varies year to year, and the last 2 years were not your strongest." "Because I was holding the household together while he was running around with Betrayal," Noelle said quietly. "I understand, but the court looks at numbers, not context. We'll push for a fair split, but I want you to be prepared. He's going to fight for the house." "Let him have it." Patricia looked at her across the desk. "Are you sure? That house has equity. It's worth fighting for." "I do not want to spend the next year in a courtroom arguing over a house that smells like his cologne. I want this to be done." Patricia nodded slowly. "I respect that, but I need you to understand something. Terrence is not going to play fair. He's already moved some of his commission income into an account we can't easily trace. I've requested financial disclosure, but Lance Greer is dragging his feet. They're stalling. Can we make them comply?" "We can push, and we will. But it takes time, and every day they stall is a day they have to move things around." The court proceedings played out over 3 months. 3 months of paperwork, filings, motions, and 2 appearances before a judge who seemed perpetually tired. Terrence showed up to every court date in expensive suits with Lance Greer at his side, looking relaxed and confident. He played the role of a reasonable man being forced through an unfortunate process. He told the judge that he and Noelle had simply grown apart. He expressed his deep respect for her. He even managed to look sad at the right moments. Noelle sat across the aisle in the green blouse her mother had sent her from North Carolina, the one with the small gold buttons. She wore it like a kind of quiet strength. She did not perform for the judge. She told the truth. She answered questions directly. She did not cry. When it came to the property split, Terrence's attorney argued that the house was primarily funded by Terrence's income, that the mortgage was in his name, and that Noelle's financial contribution to the household was inconsistent. They presented spreadsheets. They presented bank statements. They made it look like Noelle had been a passenger in the marriage, financially speaking. Patricia pushed back. She showed the judge records of Noelle's design income being deposited into their joint account. She showed grocery receipts, utility payments, and evidence that Noelle had funded most of the household's daily expenses, while Terrence's commissions went into his personal accounts. But the judge, a man named Judge Fenton who had seen thousands of divorces, looked at the bottom line. Terrence earned more. The house was in Terrence's name. The mortgage was in Terrence's name. The ruling came down on a Thursday afternoon. Terrence got the house. He got the newer car, a black SUV that Noelle had never liked anyway. He got the majority of the savings, though Patricia managed to secure a settlement payment for Noelle that was, in Patricia's words, not nothing, but not what you deserve. Noelle got her personal belongings, her clothing, a smaller settlement check, and whatever items she claimed as hers from the household. "What about the toolbox?" Patricia asked during the final property review. Terrence's attorney actually laughed. "The toolbox? That rusty thing in the garage? My client has no interest in it. She can have it." It was entered into the record. Noelle Carter would receive one red metal toolbox, described as antique, of no significant value, among her personal effects. Terrence signed the papers with a pen that clicked too loudly in the quiet courtroom. He did not look at Noelle when he signed. He looked at Lance Greer, who gave him a small, satisfied nod. Noelle signed next. Her hand was steady. Outside the courthouse, Patricia walked Noelle to her car, which was the older of their 2 vehicles, a sedan that Terrence had grudgingly let her keep. "I know this doesn't feel like a win," Patricia said. "It doesn't. But you're free. And that is worth more than anything in that house." Noelle thanked her, got in her car, and drove to the house one last time to collect her things. Terrence was not there. He had gone somewhere with Betrayal, probably celebrating. The house was half-packed already, boxes with his name on them, new furniture catalogs on the counter. He was already redecorating, erasing her from the space before she had even finished moving out. Simone met her at the house with her pickup truck. Together, they loaded up Noelle's clothes, a few boxes of personal items, some framed photos of her grandfather, and the toolbox. The toolbox was heavy. It always had been. Noelle and Simone each took one end and carried it to the truck bed. "What's even in this thing?" Simone asked, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Grandpa's old tools. Hand planes, chisels, some wrenches. He was a carpenter and a machinist. He kept everything. It weighs a ton. It's solid metal. They made things to last back then." Simone looked at the toolbox in the truck bed, then at the house, then back at Noelle. "You deserve better than this, Noelle. You know that, right?" "I know." They drove away from the house without looking back. In the rearview mirror, Noelle saw the garage door closing slowly, automatic on its timer. The house sat behind her, getting smaller. She had spent 8 years in that house. 8 years of cooking, cleaning, decorating, fixing, compromising, apologizing, and pretending. Now it was Terrence's. All of it. The house, the yard, the mortgage payments, the leaky faucet in the upstairs bathroom that he had never bothered to fix. All his. In the back of Simone's truck, the rusty toolbox rattled quietly over every bump in the road. Its weight shifted. Its old metal groaned. And somewhere inside it, beneath a false bottom that no one had touched in over a decade, there were things waiting to be found. But Noelle did not know that yet. All she knew was that everything she owned in the world now fit inside one truck. "Where to?" Simone asked. "Anywhere but here," Noelle said. Simone reached over and squeezed her hand. Then she turned up the radio and drove. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that smelled like cleaning solution and old carpet. It had one bedroom, a bathroom with a shower that took 4 minutes to get hot, a kitchen the size of a hallway, and a living room with one window that looked out onto the parking lot. The rent was $1,100 a month. It was what Noelle could afford. Simone helped her carry boxes up the narrow staircase. They made 6 trips. On the last trip, they brought up the toolbox together, and Simone nearly dropped her end on the 2nd floor landing. "I swear this thing has bricks inside it," Simone said, catching her breath. They set the toolbox in the corner of the living room next to the wall. There was no furniture to put it on, no shelf or table, just the corner. The apartment came unfurnished. Noelle had a sleeping bag, a pillow, and a suitcase of clothes. Simone stood in the middle of the empty living room with her hands on her hips. "This is temporary," she said. "You hear me? Temporary." "I know." "I mean it, Noelle. This is not your life. This is just where you're standing right now. You're going to get through this." Noelle nodded, but the truth was, standing in that apartment with bare walls and bare floors, she did not feel like someone who was going to get through anything. She felt hollow. Simone left around 9 that night after they ate takeout sitting on the floor. She hugged Noelle at the door and told her to call any time, day or night. Then Noelle was alone. The first week was the hardest. She went to work each morning, meeting with her freelance clients, putting together design boards, sourcing fabrics and paint colors. She was good at this. She had always been good at this, but her heart was not in it. She moved through the days like she was watching herself from outside her own body. At night, in the apartment, it was worse. The quiet was the kind that presses against your ears. No sounds of Terrence watching television in the other room. No footsteps, no keys jingling in the door. Just her own breathing and the hum of the refrigerator. She did not call Terrence. She did not check his social media. Simone had made her promise. "Block him on everything," Simone had said. "I mean it. Every platform, every app. You do not need to see what he's doing." Noelle had blocked him. But some nights, lying in her sleeping bag on the floor, she still wondered. Not because she wanted him back. She knew she did not want him back. But because her brain kept replaying the 8 years, searching for the moment things went wrong, searching for the things she could have done differently. She knew this was a trap. She knew it was not productive. Patricia had told her, "You did not cause this. Do not spend your energy trying to figure out what you could have changed. He made his choices." But knowing something and feeling something are 2 different things. By the 2nd week, Noelle had bought a cheap futon, a small kitchen table, and 2 folding chairs. She hung one photo on the wall, a picture of her grandfather standing in front of his workshop in Charlotte. wearing his canvas apron, smiling his wide, gap-toothed smile. It was the only decoration in the entire apartment. One Thursday evening, after a particularly long day of client meetings that led nowhere, Noelle came home and sat on the futon and stared at the toolbox. It had been sitting in that corner since she moved in. She hadn't opened it, hadn't touched it. It just sat there, the same way it had sat in Terrence's garage for 8 years, ignored and underestimated. She got up and walked over to it. The clasps were stiff. The left one had always stuck. She pressed it with her thumb the way her grandfather had taught her, at an angle, and it popped open. The lid creaked as she lifted it. Inside, the top tray was arranged the way it had always been. Hand planes, small ones with wooden handles worn smooth from decades of use, chisels with brass ends, wrenches in 4 different sizes, a small carpenter's level with a green bubble. Everything was old, everything was heavy, and everything smelled like metal and wood oil. Noelle picked up one of the hand planes and turned it over in her hands. She remembered sitting on a stool in her grandfather's workshop, watching him run a plane along a piece of oak, the thin curls of wood rolling off the blade. She was maybe 7 years old. He let her try, guiding her hands, telling her to go slow and let the tool do the work. "The tool knows what it's doing, Noelle," he used to say. "You just have to hold on and trust it." She placed the hand plane back and lifted the top tray out. Beneath it was the lower tray, a deeper section that held larger tools. Hammers, a hand drill, a set of socket wrenches, and a folding ruler. She reached in and adjusted the hammers, and that's when she felt it. The bottom of the tray moved. Not much, just a slight shift, like it was resting on something instead of being fixed in place. She pressed down on it, and it gave a tiny bit. She lifted the tray out entirely and set it on the floor. Then she looked down into the main body of the toolbox. The bottom looked normal. Metal, painted red underneath, same as the exterior. But when she pressed on the far left side, the right side lifted up, just a fraction of an inch. It was a false bottom. Noelle's heart began to beat faster. She worked her fingers along the edge until she found a small notch, just wide enough for a fingertip. She pulled, and the false bottom panel came up. Underneath, there was a space about 3 inches deep that ran the entire length of the toolbox. And in that space, wrapped in old cloth and leather, were things she had never seen before. There were 3 leather pouches tied with twine, a small wooden box with brass hinges, and a folded piece of paper, yellow with age, written in a hand she would recognize anywhere. Her grandfather's handwriting. She unfolded the paper carefully. The creases were deep, the ink slightly faded but still legible. It read, "Dear Noelle, if you are reading this, then I am gone and you needed to find what's here. I spent my whole life collecting these things. Some I found, some I was given, some I traded for. They are yours now. Do not sell them unless you truly need to. And if you do, find someone who knows what they are worth. Not a pawn shop, not a flea market, someone who understands. I love you, baby girl. You were always my greatest treasure. Grandpa Henry." Noelle read the note 3 times. Her eyes blurred. She pressed the paper to her chest and sat on the floor next to the toolbox for a long while. Then, with careful hands, she opened the first leather pouch. Inside was a pocket watch. Not just any pocket watch. It was gold, heavier than she expected, with an engraved case showing a train and a mountain range. The crystal was original, uncracked. On the back, tiny letters read, "Waltham, 1878. She opened the second pouch. Inside were coins, old coins, thick and heavy, in a variety of sizes. Some had dates she could barely read. One of them, a large gold coin, had the year 1854 stamped into it. The third pouch held something wrapped in a piece of soft chamois cloth. She unwrapped it slowly. It was a set of miniature surgical instruments laid out in a leather case. They were delicate, precise, and clearly very old. A card inside the case read, "Field Surgical Kit, circa 1863. The wooden box with brass hinges contained hand-forged tools. Small, beautifully made tools with handles of bone and walnut. Each one had a maker's mark stamped into the metal, a small H inside a diamond shape. Noelle sat surrounded by all of it. These objects that had been waiting for her in the dark belly of a rusty toolbox while her marriage collapsed, while her husband cleaned out her home, while she slept on a floor and ate takeout alone. She reached for her phone and called Simone. "Simone," she said, and her voice shook for the first time in weeks. "I need to show you something." Simone came over the next morning before her shift at the hospital. She stood in Noelle's living room, looking down at the collection spread out on the kitchen table, and she did not say anything for almost a full minute. "Noelle," she finally said, "what is all this?" "I don't know exactly. That's the problem. I know they're old. I know Grandpa collected them over decades, but I don't know what they're worth." Simone picked up the pocket watch carefully, turning it over in her hands. "This is beautiful. Where did he even find these things?" "Estate sales, mostly. He used to drive all over the Carolinas, going to farm auctions and estate liquidations. My grandmother used to complain about it. She said he spent more time at dead people's sales than at home." "Your grandmother was a wise woman." Noelle smiled. It was the first real smile she had felt in weeks. "I need to get these appraised," Noelle said. "But I don't know who to call. Grandpa's note said not a pawn shop, not a flea market. Someone who understands." Simone thought for a moment. "My uncle used to collect coins. He took his stuff to a guy down on Mercer Avenue, an antiques dealer. Old man, been in business forever. Let me get you the name." By that afternoon, Noelle had the name Mr. Roland Whitfield. He operated out of a narrow shop called Whitfield Rare Antiques and Estate Appraisals, tucked between a dry cleaner and a Thai restaurant on the east side of the city. Noelle called and made an appointment for the following day. She did not sleep that night. She lay on her futon, staring at the ceiling, thinking about her grandfather. Henry Franklin had been a quiet man. He worked as a machinist at a manufacturing plant for 32 years, and on weekends he built furniture in his workshop behind the house. He never talked about money. He never talked about wealth. He wore the same work boots until they fell apart, and he drove the same truck for 15 years. But he traveled every weekend. Those estate sales, those auctions, those long drives into the countryside. Noelle's grandmother, who passed before Henry did, used to say, "Your grandfather comes home with junk and smiles." What nobody knew, what even Noelle's mother Denise did not know, was that Henry Franklin had been quietly assembling one of the most remarkable private collections in the state. And he had hidden it all inside a toolbox. The next morning, Noelle put on her blue wrap dress, the one she wore when she wanted to feel like herself, and drove to Whitfield Rare Antiques with the toolbox in the back seat. Mr. Whitfield was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a white beard that was trimmed close to his jaw. He moved slowly, deliberately, the way people do when they have spent their lives handling objects that break easily. His shop was crowded but organized. Glass cases held jewelry, silverware, and small figurines. The walls displayed framed maps and old photographs. "Mrs. Carter?" he said when she walked in. "Yes. Thank you for seeing me on short notice. Please, bring it in." Noelle carried the toolbox to the long wooden counter at the back of the shop. She set it down and opened it, removing the top tray and the lower tray to reveal the false bottom. Then she laid out the leather pouches, the wooden box, and her grandfather's note. Mr. Whitfield put on a pair of cotton gloves. He picked up the pocket watch first. Within 5 seconds, his expression changed. The polite, professional calm was replaced by something sharper. He brought the watch close to his face, turning it slowly, examining the engravings, the crystal, the movement visible through the back case. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "My grandfather. He collected things his entire life. These were hidden in the toolbox." Mr. Whitfield set the watch down carefully and picked up the coins. He examined each one individually, using a jeweler's loupe. His hands were steady, but Noelle noticed a slight tension in his shoulders, the kind of tension a person shows when they are trying very hard to stay calm. He spent 45 minutes going through everything: the surgical kit, the hand-forged tools, the coins, the pocket watch. He made notes on a pad of paper, jotting down dates, maker's marks, and condition assessments. When he reached the hand-forged tools in the wooden box, he set down his loupe and took off his glasses. "Mrs. Carter, do you know what these are?" "Old tools. These are hand-forged woodworking tools made by Josiah Pemberton. He was a free black craftsman in North Carolina in the mid-1800s. He made tools for other freedmen and for plantation workshops. His work is extremely rare. There are maybe 12 known Pemberton pieces in existence. You have 4. Noelle felt the room tilt slightly. The pocket watch is in 1,878 Waltham Railroad grade in near mint condition. The coins include an 1,854 Liberty Head Double Eagle that, if it grades the way I think it will, is worth a substantial amount on its own. The surgical kit is a Civil War-era field set, and based on the markings, it was likely used by a Union Army surgeon. He paused. Mrs. Carter, I've been in this business for 37 years. I've appraised estates worth millions, but I have never seen a private collection like this assembled by one person. Your grandfather had an extraordinary eye. How much? Noelle asked. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. Mr. Whitfield looked at his notes. Then he looked at Noelle over the top of his glasses. A conservative estimate, and I mean conservative, accounting for current auction values and the condition of these pieces. The total value of this collection is approximately $4.2 million. The number hung in the air between them. Noelle did not gasp. She did not scream. She sat down on the wooden stool next to the counter and placed both hands flat on the surface to steady herself. She stared at the toolbox, the rusty, dented, faded red box that Terence had mocked every year of their marriage. The one thing he hadn't wanted. $4.2 million. I would recommend, Mr. Whitfield continued gently, that you secure these items in a bonded storage facility immediately. I can provide referrals, and when you're ready to discuss options, whether that's selling individual pieces at auction, selling the collection as a whole, or insuring it for private display, I can connect you with the right people. I need to think, Noelle said. Of course, take your time. But please, Mrs. Carter, keep these safe. The Pemberton tools alone are museum-quality pieces. If word got out, I understand. She packed everything back into the toolbox with the same care her grandfather must have used when he placed them there years ago. She thanked Mr. Whitfield, who insisted on walking her to her car and watching her drive away. In the car, Noelle sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes without moving. Then she called 2 people. First, Simone. It's real, Noelle said. $4.2 million. Simone was silent for so long that Noelle thought the call had dropped. Say that again? Simone whispered. $4.2 million. The watch, the coins, the tools, all of it. My grandfather was sitting on a fortune, and he hid it in a toolbox. Noelle. I know. That man, your grandfather, was something else. He really was. The second call was to Patricia Okafor. Patricia, it's Noelle. I need to meet with you as soon as possible. Something has changed. Patricia's voice was immediately alert. Changed how? I found something in the toolbox. My grandfather left me a collection of antiques worth over $4 million. The line was quiet for a moment. Then Patricia spoke in her calm, measured tone. Do not tell anyone else. Do not post anything online. Do not contact Terence. Come to my office tomorrow morning at 8. We need to talk about how to protect this. Already planned on it. Noelle, this is good news, but we need to handle it carefully. The divorce is finalized, but there are windows where an ex-spouse can try to challenge a settlement if new assets come to light. We need to make sure every single piece of this is airtight. Terence signed it away. He didn't want the toolbox. It's on the record. I know, and that works in our favor. But let me review everything. I want this locked down so tight that not even Lance Greer can touch it. That night, Noelle sat on her futon with the toolbox at her feet and her grandfather's note in her hands. She read it one more time. I love you, baby girl. You were always my greatest treasure. She folded the note carefully and placed it back inside the toolbox. Then she closed the lid, pressed the stiff clasp until it clicked, and went to sleep. For the first time in months, she slept through the entire night. Patricia Okafor's office at 8 in the morning had the feeling of a place where serious things happened. The blinds were half open, letting in pale blue daylight. A pot of coffee sat on the side table. Patricia was already at her desk, 2 folders open in front of her, reading glasses on, pen in hand. Noelle sat down across from her, wearing her maroon blazer and a pair of pressed black slacks. She had the appraiser's written estimate in an envelope. She slid it across the desk. Patricia read it slowly, twice, then set it down. 4.2 million, Patricia said, not as a question but as a statement. She let the number sit. Here's what we need to talk about. Patricia continued. The divorce decree is signed and filed. In the property settlement, the toolbox was listed as a personal item of yours, described as, and I'm quoting from the document, one antique metal toolbox, no significant monetary value. Terrence's attorney did not contest it. Terrence himself waived any claim to it in writing. So he can't come after it. Legally, no. The division is final. Personal property was allocated. He accepted the terms. But I've seen ex-spouses try creative arguments when this kind of money surfaces. They claim fraud, hidden assets, misrepresentation. The claims almost never succeed when the asset was clearly disclosed and waived, but they can be costly and stressful to fight. So what do? You stay quiet. For now, for at least the next 6 months, you tell no one about this outside of myself and whoever you've already told. Simone knows. Simone is fine. Anyone else? No. Good. Keep it that way. I'm going to have a colleague in asset protection review the divorce settlement language. If we need to file any supplementary documentation to reinforce your claim, we'll do it preemptively. I also want you to open a trust, not a personal account, a trust. It provides a layer of protection and keeps the assets separate from anything that could be contested. Noelle listened carefully and took notes on a small pad she had brought with her. Now, Patricia said, leaning back in her chair, what do you want to do with the money? Noelle had been thinking about this since the moment she left Mr. Whitfield's shop. I don't want to sell everything at once. Mr. Whitfield said the Pemberton tools are museum pieces. I want to keep those, at least for now. Maybe loan them to a museum eventually. My grandfather would have liked that. Patricia nodded. The rest, the watch, the coins, the surgical kit, I'll sell through a reputable auction house when the time is right. Mr. Whitfield said he can advise on timing. In the meantime, I want to use some of the settlement money I already have, plus a small portion from a private sale of one of the coins, to start my business properly. What kind of business? I'm an interior designer. I've been freelancing for 6 years, taking whatever work I can get. Small jobs, residential rooms, home staging for real estate agents. But I've always wanted to open my own firm, a real studio with employees, commercial clients, the kind of projects that change how spaces feel for hundreds of people. Patricia studied her for a moment. You've thought about this. I've had a lot of empty nights in a small apartment. Thinking is about the only thing I could afford. Good. Thinking is free, and it pays well later. Over the next 2 weeks, Noelle put the plan in motion. She worked with a financial advisor Patricia recommended, a woman named Helen Cross, who specialized in sudden wealth management. Helen helped Noelle set up the trust, diversify a portion of the funds into investments, and create a budget for the business launch. The most important thing, Helen told her, is to not change your visible lifestyle overnight. Live within your freelance income for now. Let the business grow organically. When you start showing profit from the firm, then you adjust your spending accordingly. It looks natural. It attracts no attention. Noelle followed the plan with precision. She did not buy a new car. She did not move out of the small apartment, not yet. She continued taking freelance clients during the day. But in the evenings and on weekends, she was building something. She found commercial space on Birch Street, a 900 square foot storefront with tall windows and original hardwood floors. It had been empty for months, and the landlord gave her a fair lease. She hired a contractor to repaint the interior. White walls, clean lines, exactly the aesthetic she wanted for her studio. She ordered furniture, drafting tables, sample shelves, a client meeting area with a round table, and 4 blue upholstered chairs. She named the firm Franklin Design Co. after her grandfather. Simone came by during the build-out, bringing sandwiches and coffee. She stood in the middle of the unfinished studio, looking around with wide eyes. You're really doing this, Simone said. I'm really doing it. Noelle, I'm so proud of you I could burst. Please don't. I just had the floors refinished. Simone laughed. And Noelle laughed too, and it felt good. It felt like a sound she had been missing for months. Noelle put out a quiet announcement on her professional network page. Nothing flashy, just a simple post with a photo of the studio door, freshly painted, with the name Franklin Design Co., stenciled in green letters. Within a week, she had 3 inquiries. One was a restaurant owner looking to redesign his dining room. One was a couple renovating a brownstone. And one, the one that made Noelle sit down at her new drafting table and stare at the email for 5 minutes, was from a property development group looking for a designer to handle the interiors of a new boutique hotel being built on the waterfront. The email was from the project's architect. His name was Caleb Morrison. "We've seen your portfolio, and we think your style would be a great fit for this project." The email read, "The hotel is 24 rooms, a lobby, a restaurant, and 2 event spaces. Would you be available to meet and discuss?" Noelle read the email 3 times. Then she picked up the phone and called Simone. "Simone, I just got an inquiry for a hotel project." "A hotel? Like a whole hotel?" 24 rooms, lobby, restaurant, event spaces. "Noelle Franklin Carter, you better say yes to that meeting." "I already replied." Noelle did not tell Simone about the tightness in her chest, the small voice that said she was not ready, that she was too small for this, that she was just a woman in a tiny apartment with a futon and a toolbox. She did not mention the voice because she had decided, sitting in Patricia's office with pale blue light falling across the desk, that she was done listening to it. Her grandfather had spent a lifetime quietly collecting treasures that the world overlooked. He had hidden them away, not because he was ashamed of them, but because he trusted that the right person would find them at the right time. Noelle was going to do the same thing. She was going to build something valuable, something real, and she was going to do it so quietly that by the time anyone noticed, it would be too big to ignore. She turned off the light in her studio, locked the front door, and walked to her car. The evening air was cool. The street was quiet. She drove home to her small apartment, heated up leftover soup, and sat at her kitchen table with her laptop, looking at boutique hotel interiors from around the world. She worked until midnight. Then she went to sleep. No one knew about the $4.2 million. No one needed to. Not yet. 6 months changed everything. Noelle remembered reading somewhere that most people overestimate what they can accomplish in a week and underestimate what they can accomplish in 6 months. She thought about that often during those first months of running Franklin Design Co. because every week felt small, but the accumulation was staggering. The restaurant redesign was the first project completed. The owner, a man named Otis Whitaker, who had been running a soul food restaurant for 20 years, gave her full creative freedom. Noelle turned a tired, dimly lit space into something warm and inviting. New upholstery in deep greens and blues, custom light fixtures, a reclaimed wood accent wall sourced from a barn in Virginia. Otis cried when he saw it. He literally stood in the middle of his own restaurant and cried. "This is what I always wanted it to look like," he told her. "I just didn't have the words for it." That project led to 2 more referrals, then 3 more. Franklin Design Co. was not just growing, it was gaining a reputation. But the hotel project was the one that changed the scale of everything. Noelle met Caleb Morrison for the first time at a coffee shop near the construction site. He suggested coffee instead of a formal office meeting, which she appreciated. It felt less intimidating. Caleb was tall, with deep brown skin, close-cropped hair, and a quiet confidence that did not announce itself. He wore a blue button-down, sleeves rolled to the elbows, and when he shook Noelle's hand, his grip was firm but not aggressive. He looked her in the eyes when he spoke, and he listened when she talked. Actually listened, the kind of listening where the other person is not just waiting for their turn to speak. "I found your portfolio through a colleague," he said. "The brownstone renovation you did on Alden Street. It was the best residential interior work I've seen in this city in years." "Thank you. That was a passion project." "It shows. That's what we want for this hotel, not cookie-cutter design, something with personality, something that makes people feel like the building has a soul." They talked for 2 hours, about the hotel, about design philosophy, about the neighborhood and what it needed. Caleb had designed the building's exterior with references to the area's maritime history. Noelle proposed interiors that complemented that without being theme park obvious. textured fabrics that recalled sailcloth, color palettes drawn from the ocean and the sky, not a literal blue and white scheme, but subtle nods. Local art in every room, commissioned from artists in the surrounding community. Caleb leaned back in his chair and smiled, the first full smile she'd seen from him. "You understand what we're trying to do," he said. "I understand what this building wants to be. It just needs someone to bring it out." The contract was signed 2 weeks later. It was the largest project Noelle had ever taken on, and it required her to expand the team. She hired Janine Pryor, a 26-year-old design school graduate who had applied to the firm with a handwritten cover letter and a portfolio full of clever, resourceful solutions for small spaces. "I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment with 4 siblings," Janine told Noelle during the interview. "I learned that design isn't about having a big space. It's about making any space feel like it belongs to you." Noelle hired her on the spot. With Janine and another assistant, a logistics coordinator named Ruben Flores, Franklin Design Co. moved from a one-woman operation to a real team. They worked long hours in the Birch Street studio, spreading fabric samples across the drafting tables, debating furniture placement, making mood boards that covered the entire back wall. In the middle of all of this, Noelle bought the townhouse. It was on Prospect Lane, in a neighborhood she used to drive through on her way to client meetings, always admiring the tree-lined streets and the brick facades. The townhouse had 3 bedrooms, a small garden in the back, original crown molding, and a view of the park from the second-floor balcony. It needed work, which was fine. Noelle knew exactly what to do with it. She paid cash. The money came from the trust, carefully structured so that the purchase was clean and untraceable to anything that could raise questions. Helen Cross handled the details. The first thing Noelle put in the new townhouse, before the furniture, before the curtains, before anything else, was the toolbox. She placed it on the living room shelf where the light from the front window fell across its surface every morning. Moving day was a Saturday. Simone came with her truck again, and this time there was more to move. Noelle had accumulated things over the past 6 months. The futon, which she donated, a real bed, kitchen supplies, books, work materials. "From a sleeping bag on the floor to a townhouse on Prospect Lane," Simone said, standing in the new kitchen. "In 6 months." "It's not about the money," Noelle said. "I know, it's about the life. It's about building something that's mine, something nobody can take." Simone looked at her best friend, standing in her new kitchen in a red sweater and jeans, and she saw something she hadn't seen in a long time. Not happiness exactly, but something close. Steadiness. Purpose. The look of a person who knows where they're going. The hotel project consumed most of Noelle's working hours for the next 3 months. She and Caleb met twice a week, sometimes at the site, sometimes at her studio, to review progress. They developed a shorthand, the way people do when they work closely on something they both care about. He would send her a photo of a structural detail, and she would respond with a fabric swatch that echoed it. She would sketch a layout, and he would annotate it with notes about sightlines and natural light. They never talked about their personal lives during work meetings. But after a site visit one Tuesday, walking back to their cars in the late afternoon sun, Caleb mentioned that he had recently ended a long relationship. 3 years, he said. We wanted different things. I wanted to build a life, and she wanted to keep hers exactly the way it was. Noelle nodded. She understood that kind of mismatch. What about you? He asked, if you don't mind my asking. Divorced. Recently. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was necessary. He did not push for more, and she appreciated that. He simply nodded, said, I understand, and they went to their respective cars. But something had shifted. Not dramatically. It was more like a door opening just slightly, not enough to walk through, but enough to let a little air in. Noelle was not looking for love. She was not interested in romance. She had work to do, a company to build, a life to reconstruct. But she noticed things about Caleb. The way he treated the construction workers with the same respect he showed clients. The way he carried a worn copy of a poetry collection in his messenger bag. The way he brought coffee for the whole team when he visited the studio, always remembering that Janine liked hers with oat milk. She noticed these things and filed them away. For later, when she was ready, if she was ever ready. For now, the work was enough. Terrence Carter had always believed he was the smartest person in any room. It was the quality Noel had once mistaken for confidence back when they were dating, when his certainty about everything had felt like stability instead of arrogance. Now, 9 months after the divorce, that certainty was cracking. The house on Ridgefield Drive, the house he had fought so hard to keep, was becoming a weight around his neck. The mortgage was $3,200 a month, property taxes, maintenance. The leaky faucet in the upstairs bathroom that had been dripping since before the divorce, the one he had always told Noel he would fix and never did, had turned into a bigger problem: water damage in the wall. A plumber's estimate that made his eyes water. And then there was Betrayal. When their relationship started, Betrayal Lawson had been exciting. She was young, she laughed at his jokes, and she made him feel like the most interesting man alive. For 2 years, while he was still married, the affair had been fueled by secrecy and adrenaline. Hotels, weekend getaways, expensive dinners that he hid from Noel under business expenses. But once Betrayal moved into the Ridgefield house, the dynamic changed. The secrecy was gone. The adrenaline faded. What was left was a 28-year-old woman who was used to being spoiled, and a 37-year-old man who could no longer afford it. Betrayal wanted things. She wanted the kitchen remodeled. She wanted new furniture, even though Terrence had taken most of the furniture from his marriage with Noel. She wanted vacations. She wanted a new car because the one she was driving didn't match the neighborhood. "Terrence, we live in this beautiful house, and the living room still looks like your ex-wife decorated it," Betrayal said one evening, flipping through a home design magazine on the couch. "It is decorated. It's boring. I want something modern, something that feels like us." "That costs money, Betrayal." "You have money." He used to. The real estate market in the region had been strong for years, and Terrence's commissions had been substantial. But over the last 2 quarters, things had slowed. Interest rates climbed. Listings sat on the market longer. Buyers pulled back. His income dropped by nearly 40%. And it happened so gradually that he didn't fully register it until his checking account balance told the story. He was not broke, but he was spending more than he was making, and Betrayal's expectations had not adjusted to match. They argued more about money, about the house, about the future. Betrayal was not interested in budgeting. She was not interested in compromise. She had entered this relationship as the other woman, the exciting alternative, and she had no intention of downgrading to the role of a domestic partner counting pennies. "Maybe if you worked harder," she told him one night during an argument about a credit card bill. It stung, because it sounded like something he had once said to Noel. He didn't make the connection, not consciously, but it lingered. Meanwhile, the mortgage payments were becoming a problem. Terrence had always been good at keeping up appearances, but the numbers were getting harder to manage. He skipped a payment in March, then another in May. The bank sent letters. He ignored them, telling himself the market would bounce back. It always did. On a Tuesday morning, standing in line at a coffee shop, Terrence saw a copy of a local business magazine on the rack by the register. The cover featured a photo of a sleek, modern hotel lobby with the headline, "The Rise of Boutique Design: How Local Firms Are Reshaping Hospitality." He almost didn't pick it up, but then he saw a smaller photo in the bottom corner, a woman standing in front of a storefront. Green letters on the glass door, Franklin Design Co. It was Noel. He bought the magazine. He sat in his car and read the article twice. The feature was about Noel's firm and its work on the waterfront boutique hotel. There were photos of the completed rooms, each one more stunning than the last. There were quotes from the hotel's developer praising the design. There was a photo of Noel at her drafting table in a red blazer, looking composed and professional and completely unlike the woman he had left behind in an empty house 9 months ago. The article called Franklin Design Co., one of the most exciting new firms in the region's design community. It mentioned upcoming projects. It described Noel as a designer whose work balances elegance with emotional intelligence. Terrence stared at the magazine for a long time. He had not thought about Noel much since the divorce. Not because he didn't care, but because he had filed her away in the part of his mind where he kept things he didn't want to examine too closely. She was the past. Betrayal was the future. That was the story he told himself. But looking at this magazine, at the photo of Noel thriving, building something real, glowing with a kind of confidence he had never seen in her during their marriage, Something bitter rose in his throat. He picked up his phone and called her number. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. "Noelle, it's Terrence. I saw the magazine article. Look, I just wanted to say congratulations, and maybe we could talk sometime? I've been thinking about things and, anyway, call me back when you get a chance." Noelle listened to the voicemail once, standing in her studio on Birch Street. Janine was at the drafting table behind her, working on a mood board. Noelle played the message, then deleted it. She did not call back. Terrence waited 3 days. Then he called again. Voicemail again. He left another message, this one shorter. "Hey, it's me, just checking in. Hope you're doing well." No response. He tried texting. "Saw the article. Really impressed. Can we catch up?" Read, no reply. The silence from Noelle was more devastating than any argument could have been. Arguments, at least, meant the other person still cared enough to fight. Silence meant she had moved on so completely that he no longer occupied any space in her life. Terrence set the phone down on his kitchen counter, the same counter where Noelle had once cooked dinner every night, and he looked around the house. Brielle had put new curtains in the living room. They were white and sheer and too thin for the windows. The kitchen still had the tile backsplash Noelle had installed herself 2 summers ago. The wall in the hallway still had the hook where her grandfather's photo used to hang. She had left traces everywhere, small ones, the kind of traces that only mattered if you knew where to look. His phone buzzed. A text from Brielle. "Can you pick up wine on the way home? The good kind." He put the phone in his pocket and drove to the store, and he bought the cheap kind because the good kind was no longer in the budget. At home, Brielle looked at the bottle and frowned. "I said the good kind." "This is fine." "This is $12, Terrence." "It's wine. It does the same thing regardless of the price." They ate dinner in a silence that felt different from the silences he had shared with Noelle. With Noelle, silence had been comfortable, the kind of quiet that happens between 2 people who are simply existing in the same space. With Brielle, silence felt like a countdown. After dinner, Brielle went upstairs without saying goodnight. Terrence sat in the living room and looked at the magazine again. In the photo, Noelle was wearing a red blazer. Her skin was radiant. Her posture was strong. Her expression was calm, the kind of calm that comes from a person who knows exactly where they stand. He closed the magazine and set it on the coffee table, face down. He did not know about the Toolbox. He did not know about the $4.2 million. He did not know that the woman he had called his wife for 8 years, the woman whose little decorating projects he had mocked, was now sitting on a fortune that had been hidden inside the one thing he had refused to take. He would find out soon enough. 1 year after the divorce, Franklin Design Co. won the Regional Interior Design Award for the Boutique Hotel project. The ceremony was held at the Whitcomb Center downtown, a venue Noelle had actually visited once as a guest years ago when Terrence dragged her to a real estate industry gala. She remembered feeling invisible that night, standing in a corner in a dress Terrence hadn't commented on, watching him work the room while she held a glass of sparkling water and waited to go home. Now she stood at the podium in a green silk dress with gold earrings that caught the stage lights. The room held 200 people, and they were all looking at her. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was clear and even. "This award belongs to the entire Franklin design team. Janine Pryor, who brought more creativity to this project than I could have asked for. Ruben Flores, who somehow kept us on schedule despite my tendency to change my mind about textiles at the last possible moment." Quiet laughter from the audience. "But I want to talk about the name of the firm for a moment. Franklin Design Co. is named after my grandfather, Henry Franklin. He was a machinist and a craftsman in Charlotte, North Carolina. He spent his life building things with his hands. Beautiful things, practical things, things that lasted. He taught me that good work speaks for itself, that you don't need to announce your value to the world. You just need to do the work, and the right people will notice." She paused. "My grandfather left me something when he passed, something I didn't fully understand the value of until very recently. He left me a toolbox, a rusty, dented, old red toolbox that he had carried around for decades. Everyone who saw it thought it was junk, but inside that toolbox was a lifetime of quiet brilliance. Rare antiques, hand-forged tools, pieces of history that he had collected one by one over the course of his entire life. The room was still. I learned something from that toolbox. I learned that the things other people overlook are sometimes the most valuable things in the room. I learned that just because something looks ordinary on the outside doesn't mean it's ordinary on the inside. And I learned that the people who love you the most sometimes leave you gifts that take time to understand. She lifted the award, a crystal piece etched with the firm's name. This is for you, Grandpa. Everything I build because you taught me how. The applause was warm. Noelle returned to her seat at the front table, where Simone was wiping her eyes with a cocktail napkin and Janine was grinning so wide it looked like it hurt. 2 weeks after the ceremony, a journalist named Diane Kessler from the city's main newspaper reached out to Noelle for a feature piece. Diane was writing a series on local entrepreneurs, and Noelle's speech had caught her attention. "I'm interested in the full story," Diane said during their phone call. "The toolbox, the grandfather, how you started the firm. There's something powerful there." Noelle considered it carefully. She talked to Patricia first. "The divorce has been final for over a year," Patricia said. "The asset division is settled and cannot be reopened. The toolbox was explicitly allocated to you in the decree. There is no legal risk in going public." "What about Terrence?" "What about him? He has no claim. The document is clear, and his own attorney laughed it off during proceedings. If he tries anything, we shut it down in a day." Noelle gave the interview. The article ran on a Sunday, front page of the lifestyle section. The headline read, "The Rusty Toolbox: How One Woman's Inheritance Became a $4.2 million Discovery and a Design Empire." The piece told the story well. Diane Kessler was a careful writer. She covered Noelle's childhood in Charlotte, her grandfather's life and legacy, the discovery of the hidden compartment, the appraisal, and the founding of Franklin Design Co. The article included a photo of Noelle in her studio and another of the toolbox itself, sitting on the shelf in her townhouse, polished but still bearing its original dents and scratches. The article went online that morning, and by Tuesday it had been shared over 8,000 times. Noelle's phone did not stop buzzing. Interview requests, partnership inquiries, messages from old friends, and notes from strangers who found the story moving. Janine had to manage the studio inbox because it was overflowing with messages from potential clients. Terrence Carter read the article on Sunday afternoon. He was sitting on the couch in the Ridgefield house, the house with the second notice mortgage letter sitting on the kitchen counter. The house where Betrayal had packed a bag 2 weeks earlier and gone to stay with a friend for a while after their latest argument about money. He was alone. He read the article once, quickly, his eyes scanning for the key details. Then he read it again, slowly. The toolbox, the rusty red toolbox, the one he had called that ugly piece of junk, the one he had begged Noelle to throw away, the one his own attorney had laughed about during the divorce proceedings. It was worth $4.2 million. The number landed in his stomach like a stone dropped in water. He felt the impact spread outward, rippling through every memory, every conversation, every moment he had mocked that box and the woman who refused to let it go. He picked up his phone and called Lance Greer. "Lance, I just read something. My ex-wife's toolbox, the one we left out of the settlement because it was worthless. It's worth $4 million. We need to reopen the settlement." Lance Greer was quiet for a moment. Then he sighed. "Terrence, we went over the personal property allocation line by line. The toolbox was listed. You waived any claim to it. I have the signed document. But I didn't know it was worth $4 million. That has to be fraud. She hid the value." She didn't know the value either. The article says she discovered the hidden compartment after the divorce was finalized. There's no fraud if the value was unknown to both parties at the time of the agreement. But, Terrence, listen to me. The item was her personal inheritance from before the marriage. It was classified as her separate property. You explicitly declined it. Even if you hadn't, it would be an uphill battle. Premarital inheritance is one of the hardest things to claim in a divorce settlement. You have no case. There has to be something. Anything. There isn't. I'm sorry, but this is not something I can help you with. If you want a second opinion, I can refer you to someone, but I'm telling you, any attorney worth their license will say the same thing. Terrence hung up and sat in the quiet house for a very long time. He thought about calling Patricia Okafor's office directly. He did the next morning, leaving a message with her secretary. Patricia called him back herself. "Mr. Carter," she said, and her voice had the same calm authority it always had. "I'm calling you as a courtesy. You have no legal basis for any claim against the assets described in the recent article. The toolbox was allocated to my client during the divorce. You waived your interest. The items inside were a premarital inheritance. This matter is closed." "She knew," Terrence said. "She must have known. My client discovered the hidden compartment after the settlement was finalized. The appraiser's documentation includes dated records confirming the timeline. There is nothing here for you, Mr. Carter. I strongly advise you not to pursue this further." The line went dead. Terrence set the phone on the counter and looked around the empty kitchen. The house was too big for one person. The silence was the wrong kind of silence. Not peaceful, just empty. He thought about the sticky note he had left Noelle the day he cleaned out the house. 5 words. "The lawyer will be in touch." He wondered what she had felt when she read it. If she had cried, if she had been angry. He would never know, because Noelle had not called him back, and she never would. 1 year and 3 months after the divorce, on a Saturday morning in early October, Noelle Franklin Carter stood on the balcony of her townhouse on Prospect Lane and drank coffee while the sun came up over the park across the street. The air was cool, the kind of cool that arrives with autumn and reminds you that time is always moving forward, that seasons do not stop for anyone's grief or joy. The trees in the park were beginning to turn, yellows and oranges pressing through the green. A man jogged along the path with a golden retriever that kept stopping to investigate squirrels. Noelle wore a blue cotton robe and slippers. Her hair was wrapped in a silk scarf. She held her coffee with both hands and watched the morning settle into its rhythm. Inside the townhouse, the living room was everything she had designed it to be. Clean lines, thoughtful colors, pieces she had chosen herself. The couch was linen, a soft sage green. The bookshelves held her grandfather's photo, her design books, a collection of pottery she had started buying from local artists. And on the center shelf, lit by the morning sun streaming through the front windows, sat the toolbox. She had not restored it to look new. That would have been wrong. She had cleaned it carefully, removed the surface rust, and sealed the metal to stop further deterioration. But the dents were still there. The scratched paint was still there. The clasp that never closed right was still there. These were part of its story. You don't erase the marks that prove something has been carried through a life. The Pemberton tools were on loan to the National Museum of African American History. Noelle had contacted them 6 months ago, and the curators had nearly fallen out of their chairs. 4 hand-forged tools made by a free black craftsman in 1850s North Carolina. They were now displayed in a glass case in the permanent collection, with a small placard that read, "On loan from the Franklin Family Collection, Charlotte, NC." Noelle had flown to Charlotte to tell her mother about the tools and the museum. Denise Franklin, who had spent years rolling her eyes at her father's junk collecting, had sat in her kitchen and stared at the museum's acceptance letter for 10 minutes. "Mama, are you okay?" Noelle had asked. "Your grandfather was always smarter than all of us," Denise said. "Every single one of us." The rest of the collection, the pocket watch, the coins, the surgical kit, had been sold through a respected auction house in New York. Mr. Whitfield had guided the process, ensuring each piece went to a buyer who would appreciate its significance. The final total, including the auction premium, was slightly over $4.2 million, close to the original estimate. The money was in the trust, growing steadily. A portion funded Franklin Design Co., a portion was in diversified investments that Helen Cross managed, and a portion had been set aside for the Henry Franklin Scholarship Fund, which Noelle had launched 3 months ago to support young people pursuing careers in craftsmanship, woodworking, and trades. The first scholarship recipient was a 19-year-old from Durham named Tasha Redmond, who was studying furniture design at a technical college. Noelle had met her at the award presentation and had been struck by the way Tasha talked about wood the same way Grandpa Henry used to, as if it were a living thing that deserved respect. "I want to build things that last," Tasha had said. "Not the kind of things you throw away, the kind you pass down." Noelle had nodded and thought, "Yes, that is exactly right." Franklin Design Co. now had 5 employees. Janine Pryor had been promoted to lead designer. Ruben Flores managed operations. They had completed 7 projects in the past year, including the boutique hotel, 2 restaurants, a corporate office, and 3 residential renovations. The studio on Birch Street had expanded into the adjacent unit, doubling their space. The work was good. Not easy, but good. Every project was a conversation between what a space could be and what the people inside it needed. Noelle loved that conversation. She had always loved it. The difference now was that she was having it on her own terms, in her own name, with her own team. And then there was Caleb. They had been dating for 4 months. It started the way good things often do, not with fireworks or dramatic declarations, but with small, honest moments. A lingering conversation after a project meeting. A text message that wasn't about work. A dinner at Otis Whitaker's restaurant, where Otis himself came out of the kitchen to shake Caleb's hand and whisper to Noelle, "This one has kind eyes." Caleb was not Terrence. This was not a statement born from comparison, but from recognition. Caleb did not try to impress her. He did not perform confidence. He was simply himself, a man who listened, who asked questions he wanted the answers to, who showed up when he said he would. On their 3rd date, sitting on a bench near the waterfront, Caleb had asked Noelle what she wanted most out of life. She thought about it for a while. The question deserved a real answer. "I want to build things that matter," she said, "and I want to be with people who see me clearly, not the version of me that's convenient for them, the actual me." "I think the actual you is extraordinary," Caleb said. Then he added, "And I'm not saying that to be smooth. I'm saying it because it's true." She believed him. Not because of the words, but because of the way he had shown it, day after day, in the way he treated her team, in the way he respected her decisions, in the way he never once made her feel small or invisible. They were taking it slow. Noelle was in no rush. She had learned what happens when you rush into something without knowing who you are first. She knew who she was now. She was Noelle Franklin Carter, designer, granddaughter, business owner, and a woman who had walked through the worst year of her life and come out on the other side holding something beautiful. Not the money. The money was a tool, just like the contents of the toolbox. Useful, valuable, but not the point. The point was this. She was standing on her own balcony in her own home, drinking coffee she made in her own kitchen, looking out at a morning that belonged entirely to her. No one had given her this. She had built it, piece by piece, the same way her grandfather had built his collection, the same way he had built furniture in his workshop, slowly, carefully, with intention. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She walked inside and picked it up. A text from Simone. "Breakfast? I'm craving that place on 7th. A text from Janine. "New client inquiry. Big one. Details in your inbox." A text from Caleb. "Good morning. Hope today is as good as you deserve." She smiled. 3 messages, 3 people who saw her clearly. That was more wealth than any toolbox could hold. She set the phone down and looked at the toolbox on the shelf. The morning light moved across its surface, catching the old red paint, the dents, the scratches, the imperfect clasp. It was not beautiful in the way most people understood beauty. It was beautiful in the way things are when they have survived. Noelle put on her coat, a bright red one that Simone said made her look like a woman who owned the city, and headed for the door. She had breakfast to eat, clients to meet, and a life to continue building. The toolbox stayed on the shelf, catching the light, patient, steady, full of history and worth, just like her.